Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Kata coaching webinar. This one is about understanding the challenge. My name is Maria Gerzanka. I'm with Kata School Cascadia, and Kata School is how we name Kata communities of practice around the world, and Cascadia refers to an area in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks again, Barb, and to AME for hosting us. So I will hand it over to our presenter today, Tracy Defoe, one of the co-founders of Kata School Cascadia.
Thank you so much. Okay, so today our topic is Kata coaching, understanding the challenge. So I have some questions that I plan on answering. One is, what is a challenge? And what is the role of having a challenge? I also want to talk about a good start in wording and also what do we mean by understanding the challenge. I will talk about the ways the outcome metric is a finish line for a challenge. And finally, good challenges for beginners, or at least some challenges that I have seen work well for beginners. I also will make sure you have a chance to connect with the Kata community. And so if you see a slide with a QR code on it, that will take you to whatever the slide is talking about in terms of connecting with the community. Also, I just wanted to make sure you won't be surprised if I ask Mark or Maria to chime in because I think it's a lot more interesting if we hear more voices both in the question time and now. So that's my plan for today. Many of you were here last time, but I would like to start with just talking about the coaching conversation and how does that work. So Mark talked about Mike Rother and his research that was published in the book Toyota Kata and then later on in the Toyota Kata practice guide. This is a attempt at a summary slide where we see down in the bottom left the coach and learner at a storyboard. That's the classic coaching conversations. We will talk in following weeks a little bit about coaching conversations away from the storyboard, but let's start with the basics at the storyboard. And today we're concerned with step one of the Improvement Kata pattern, understanding the challenge or direction. And so this little diagram just shows them we are here right at the beginning in the planning phase of addressing a challenge, and the coach will be using questions to draw out the understanding of the challenge or direction. Also, I always like to include the idea that the improver learner is reflecting all the time on what they're learning, and that the coach is reflecting both on the development of the learner improver and on what they're learning as they go. So this is the structure, and we are here just at the very beginning. Last time, I feel like one of those old Batman episodes. In our last episode, in our first webinar, What is Kata? Maria coached Mark with the storyboard that I've copied over here. And they started with the question that is the first question on the classic Mike Rother card, what is your target condition? But they didn't talk about the challenge. So the challenge I've got here outlined in yellow. It's on the storyboard. And this is kind of a shorthand version of the challenge for this production cell. 700 faucets a day without overtime by July 31st. Okay, so our question is, where did this challenge come from? And how did it arrive so that we need to understand it? And so I think sometimes this kind of challenge might come from a hierarchy of executives or people in an organization. Somebody at the top says, we got to cut labor costs. Or somebody at the top says, we have a chance for new business, but I don't want to put any more time, machines, or people into production. I want you to increase production with all the resources you have by 15%. And that goes down a level from this woman at the top, goes down to these ladies here. And they might say something like, ramp up 14,000 faucets a month, because that's the kind of numbers they see in their reports. Or somebody might say, if we can eliminate overtime, we're going to save those labor costs. Or they might say something like, you got to cut scrap costs. And they think in longer term times, like quarters or months. And then from those people, we go down another level, getting closer to production. And that might be where we find Maria and Mark in our situation. And they would have to ask, what does that mean in production? What does ramping up to 14,000 a month mean for me in my shift? How do we have to operate, or what patterns of work would we have to be doing to get there? What would we see different than what we see now? So the challenge sometimes comes just over the top in somebody yelling their KPI or their idea for a strategy. Not yelling, maybe just writing it in a meeting, but I've certainly seen yelling. And then it's also possible and probably preferable if that challenge is coming from a value stream map or a value stream kind of analysis, right? So they might have a business need for us to meet our overall corporate goals that we want to be delivering an order in 3 days. So that's the business need. Then we find the focus process. Where are we going to work on that? We need the person in charge of this process to focus on the changeover in stamping. I believe that this is Mark's slide, but I believe this is directly out of the value stream mapping book. And most of you probably know that Mike Rother is also co-author of the value stream mapping book. Okay, so we've got one of those little bursts here, a change that must be made. That is a place where we might find a challenge. And so now that challenge has to be made specific for the group. So this is also Mark's slide. So thanks, Mark. We'll have to challenge him to get the changeover below 10 minutes by June. This one, it happens to be by June. So this particular supervisor, let's say, or team leader for this process has now got a very specific challenge by June. So if Coach Maria was with cell leader Mark, these are the kind of questions a coach might be asking to help the learner understand the challenge or direction, but also so that they arrive at the same understanding, right? The idea of the coached first step of the Improvement Kata is that they understand together what it will be. So, what would we see in this cell if we hit that outcome without any overtime? How would it feel to not work overtime anymore? What does increasing production by 15% actually mean here? Mark always says, don't make me do math. So give me numbers. How many do we have to make? How many per day? How many per shift? How many per hour would that be? And after those kinds of discussions back and forth, they might arrive at a more fulsome challenge. On July 31st, 2026, we produce 700 faucets a day without overtime so that we can meet increasing customer demand and have our weekends back. That's the kind of language the challenge might have if we were at seeing the end of a coached process. The important part of the anchor of that, what will we see, is the outcome metric. The outcome metric in this case is 700 faucets a day. And when we started talking about what does the outcome metric mean over at Kata School Cascadia, we started talking about the outcome metric as the bridge between the current condition and the challenge, the way it has been defined. And that's why you don't want to rush over this. You want to make sure that the endpoint you're hanging all of your efforts on is the actual endpoint you want to get. So 700 faucets a day without overtime. And that's where you will always look at your current condition, look at your challenge and say, oh boy, where's the gap? And then when you look at your target condition here off to the left, I made a little gray bridge because the process metric is the bridge over there to the target condition. And I also wanted to mention, in case this is news to you, it was a very big blinding flash of the obvious to me. In current condition, there's a causal relationship between everything there. Because we are running this operating pattern, we are getting these results. And that's why we have this output of that varies between 550 and 650 or something per day. So this is a causal relationship here. Over at target condition, it's an if then. It's a hypothesis. If we run at this way, so if Alice's lowest repeatable process does not exceed 40 seconds, then we will hit a daily output of at least 600 faucets a day, okay, with no change in the work breakdown. So that's a hypothesis. And we will talk about this another time. But in a way, there is a hypothesis also built into the challenge, right? If we can do this, we will achieve this by this date. And that is kind of the underpinning of why we talk about a scientific model of thinking that we are trying to coach and develop in people with the Kata conversation. So the wording to me really, really matters. And as a coach, I will spend a lot of time on the wording. So on this date, we produce 700 faucets a day. That's your outcome metric in one shift. I would change the without overtime to in one shift. I looked back through the conditions of that example, and there is no second shift. So for 700 faucets a day in one shift, so that we can meet increasing customer demand and have our weekends back. I actually knew one company where the machinists had worked, I think, 24 weekends, 24 Saturdays in a row. And when we started an improvement to make the production needed during the Monday to Friday weeks, they 100% reported that their families, although of course they liked the money from overtime, everybody was really happy to get 2 days off and have some family time back. So you'll see a QR code there, and that will take you to the Starter Kata worksheet for a challenge shared by Gemma Jones of Spark Improvement. Gemma is, along with me, co-founder of Kata Girl Geeks and also a prolific sharer of her work. And that will take you to the kind of questions you can fill out if you are, especially, I think, new at coaching or you want to know what are all these elements. And at the bottom of that worksheet, you will see a test for the challenge. Is it important? Is it daunting? And is it thrilling? Now, daunting and thrilling, that's a pretty high bar. But by daunting, we mean, do you not know how to do it? It's hardly worth all of the trouble and conversations of a kata challenge with a coach and a learner if you already know how to do it. Like if it's not something that you don't know how to do, maybe you've as Maria taught me to say, sandbagged your challenge. Maybe you've made the challenge too easy.
I'm just
And
going
is
to
it,
add here because that's a really important point.
yeah, thank you.
I mean, this is actually one of the tenets of the Toyota way at Toyota is challenge. And the reason we're doing it is to develop the skill of our learner, the improver, to take on and improve things that are not in their comfort zone that they don't know how to do. And so if in organization, if you're not challenging people to develop skills and capabilities they don't have, you're not growing them and you're doing a disservice to them if you just keep it all in the easy zone.
Yes, exactly. And so the challenge can be set just outside the learner's knowledge zone. Like it doesn't have to be super scary. So when we said daunting, it just means, are you stretching and trying to learn new things, right? Are you outside your comfort zone enough that you're not paralyzed? And thrilling just means, is it an exciting idea that if we could do this, it would be great? Somebody said to me, I was coaching the other day, this challenge isn't the Super Bowl, but it's a game I have to win, right? So you don't want to be, you don't want to feel like everything in your careers is on this one challenge, but it's a game you want to win on your way to your success. I think that's really important. The other thing I was going to say is I might just quote Betty Groutop, who said, when you read your challenge, it should make you want to throw up, but it should also be so exciting you can't wait to do it. Like, so in other words, there should maybe be a little emotional investment and a little bit of thrill about how you could do it. In a work environment, that isn't always possible, but you think of it as it's not your Super Bowl, but it's a game you want to win for sure. So I also wanted to mention the idea of cascading challenges. So you saw the org chart before. Our friend Gerd Aulinger co-authored a book with Mike Rother that we usually call the Orange Book. And I see I didn't put a link to it, but it's very easy to find if you look up Toyota Kata culture. And in that, he outlines very clearly how you can line up or cascade challenges. So if we go back to that woman CEO or the head of that company I just mentioned before, she has her organizational strategy. And you can think that she's, whether or not maybe she has a coach, that would be awesome, but she must be monitoring metrics and she must have places she wants to get to by certain dates. She has a plan. And that would go down to the next level of at the value stream level, perhaps, if they're organized that way. And they would have challenges with different dates. Maybe this date is a year or 2 years even. These would have different dates. These are maybe 3 to 6 month challenges. But this has to happen to get us on the road to that one. And if you go down another level, you get to department challenges. And there might be each one of these three people might have had a challenge. These people might have a challenge. And they have to The people in orange have to complete their challenge to feed up to this one, which is feeding up to that one. And there could even be process level challenges like a single machine or an assembly cell. And that has to happen in order for the department to meet its challenges. So Gerd has a very structured way that he explains this, cascading challenges. And I think Mark would agree that, that would be the ideal, right? That's the best you can do with lining these up to get the most traction, but also the most learning and the most people development. Because in each level, maybe the challenge is a bit bigger, the time is a little longer, the data is a little deeper. Like you have to have a little bit more skill and a little bit maybe more coaching as you go up and down the chain.
So we've got a good question in the chat right now from Dennis, and how would we differentiate between stretching people beyond their comfort zone and their panic zone? How would the coach know where that point is?
Oh, Dennis, as you probably know, this is my happy place. So for me, you hear it in their voice. Well, if we're talking about the challenge, we're just negotiating a challenge back and forth. You often get people resisting from the get-go. And sometimes it's because they can't imagine the future. And besides their tone, their body language, and the words that they might write right there in the record of what we talked about, um, they often write those scary words. And they might even tell you, like, I don't think we can do this. This seems impossible. And so, actually, at Kata School Cascadia, in our coaches call over the years, we have had many conversations about scoping the challenge. Because sometimes a challenge comes down and it is really big, but that doesn't mean we have to frame it that way. We can frame the beginning part and gain some confidence and skill, and then the next one, and then the next one. I don't know. Mark, would you say any more about that?
Yeah, and I think that has to be a fear-free conversation, and I think that's really the key here. If the organization has a history of punishing people for not making goals, you're going to have a hard time with this. And there may be a higher level obstacle to work on first.
I have a whole talk I've given many times on psychological safety and kind of readiness for doing this. I think it's really important that the managers and coaches be tuned in to, are you safe to say, I don't know? Are you safe? Like the mascot of Kata School Cascadia, who's behind me there, is I don't know Yeti. And he comes, or they come, I decided they were they come from a discussion we had one day just about the power of an I don't know. And somebody talked about the book where they talk about I don't know yet. And Mark had the idea that we should have a mascot for Kata School Cascadia, and it should be a Yeti, and we call them I don't know Yeti. So I think that idea of the psychological safety, and you don't feel it as a coach, then you need to be really tuned in to the body language, the words people use, the tone they have. And like I said, we often talk about scaling back, scoping a smaller challenge on the way to the bigger challenge so that we can learn, develop our logic and our thinking on the way. I put this next slide up. This was my next slide anyway. And about what do we mean by understanding the challenge or direction, and what is the coach doing there? And you can see that our coach, who's Jen, she's asked, like, how will we know? What will we see exactly happening? And he's saying, well, we will see, but he's hesitating because he's not sure. And she will listen and ask a few more questions. Well, what would the pattern of work be like? Like, what would we have to be doing to get this result? And you can imagine one of the answers will be, well, we'll have to make a lot of good ones. We can't be scrapping as many as we do now. And I always like the how will it feel question, because that can also first be an anchor for the improver that they want a less stressful day. They want a smooth day. They want to feel successful when they go home. They want their coworkers to have smooth days. Or in the case of the example we had, they want to have their weekends back. So you want to kind of delve into all of those things. And at the same time that the coach is listening, they're also thinking, is this clear? Are we getting a logical sequence of events? Does the if then of this challenge make any sense? The other thing I love about this photo is you can see how comfortable they are. That this is not a particularly stressful conversation happening.
I got a question in the chat, and you were just talking about pattern of work. So this question is from John. Though Kata is well noted and this series is more real production oriented, many use kata as just a way to communicate. Are there numbers as to how many companies are practicing kata? How many in this production manner? And I know you just talked about a couple of examples that are not necessarily production, like the stable day process.
So, do I know a number? I don't know a number. I don't know. I can tell you that I've met hundreds of people and they all work in different places. And Mark's probably met 1,000 people, but no, I don't know what percentage. Pattern of work applies to all work, right? But I think if you're here, it means you're curious and you're smart enough to think maybe I could learn something here. And in that case, the kata might be either something you're practicing or something you would like to try out.
I think that my experience has been no matter how you start, I mean, it's a production oriented thing, and this is, that's what the M in AME stands for, right?
Yeah.
But once you've internalized it, it's a thinking pattern, and that thinking pattern starts getting pervasive and it becomes spontaneous and it becomes the way people frame pretty much everything they look at. But anytime people are trying to overcome a challenge, be it a personal challenge, a production challenge, work, personal.
We can come back to that because I have some other examples coming up. Um, I also wanted to talk about the finish line, or how do you know when you've met your challenge? And in the Toyota Kata practice guide, Mike Rother suggests that when you first start thinking about your challenge, you say, wouldn't it be wonderful? And I always think we need to make that an unconditional statement. Won't it be wonderful when? On this date, if we work in this manner, we achieve this result so that we get this. So I just want to stress that the challenge is in itself a hypothesis. And so you want to base it on some pretty good understanding of how you're working now and where you need to get to, where the finish line is. And that's why I like to keep them relatively short so that we have frequent opportunities to learn and frequent opportunities to reframe how we get to where we want to be. So, challenges for beginners to learn the improvement kata, because remember, a big part of the point is to develop a scientific mindset that is, in fact, your default and that you learn this internalized. So, some of the advice we give people, if it's your first or your second time being coached or trying to learn and apply the improvement kata, is to start with something that you can control. A challenge that involves coordinating with other people can give you administrative obstacles and things that you can't control. So something you can control yourself is a great place to start. We also suggest that you pick something that is meaningful and important, but not urgent. We don't want to push a learner into like urgent decisions or learning super fast. Something that is meaningful, important, but we can live with the way it is for a few weeks or a month or something like that is great. Short cycle time or frequent cycle time. And I would say at the minimum, something that you would do every single day is a good challenge for a beginner. Something that's easy to track, to see, or to videotape so that you don't have to imagine. We want to actually run a process. You'll get this in current condition, but we want to actually run a process and be able to describe the steps and the times and things like that. So you want it to be, you can't all be in your head. Okay. I have coached people who did challenges that were all about their own thinking, but it's not for the faint of heart or for the beginner. Easy to see, track, or videotape. And then be very clear in the beginning that your purpose is to practice and learn scientific thinking, to practice and learn the improvement kata. Sometimes I meet people who want to learn because they want to coach. But when you first go into this, you have to accept that you're here to learn and just be curious about how you're going to handle the pattern and how it will work for you. So that's my beginning advice. And then I have a bunch of examples. I believe as a first challenge, very frequently we find a personal work routine pain point. Something that could be better in your day that would make your day better, but that you have control of. So a smooth shift so I can take my lunch or breaks. Mark has some good stories about doing this one with nurses who never took their breaks. What would they have to do to be able to take their breaks? Or done this with many, many managers to keep my mailbox to X number of emails so I'm not a blocked information, right? So information flows. To know this one was a really good one. To know everybody who reports to me by name so I can greet them. I was really surprised by the operations manager who wanted to do this. He had about 350 people in the org chart below him. But one day, one person who worked for him had a personal tragedy, and he realized that he could walk to his car beside this person and he wouldn't even know it was them. So he wouldn't be able to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. So he thought that he felt like a bad person that he didn't know everyone. And so he set himself a challenge to learn everybody's name and be able to talk to them by name and say something like have something in common with them. So that's a simple one, or not a simple one, but it's an interesting one that hits to a little bit of heart with that one. Leave work by 5 p.m. so I am home in time for family dinner. The operations manager is another one who I did that one with. He had 3 kids under the age of 3, and dinner time was chaos for him and his wife. And he, besides figuring out how to get home on time, he also was to eliminate the need for emergency takeout meals. And he saved about $400 a month just by leaving work on time and being home to help with dinner. And then the last one, and this is the classic one, and we've done lots of recordings and webinars at Kata School Cascadia about this, is to have a predictable and stable day so that what is planned, what's in your plan for the day happens, so you can complete your work on time and leave work at work. Or often we do the stable day, like what do you think you're doing? What have you planned? What are you actually doing? We do that one because the time that we find available is the time we use for Kata coaching and improvements. So anyway, those are some work related ones. I want to show you some personal ones. But here's one I did as somebody's first kata through their work. Leave for work by 7:30 in the morning with my kids fed and lunches packed, ready for school. That was a dad who was frequently late for the 8 o'clock all hands meeting, and he figured out how to plan his evening before and how to get things done. So there you go. Drink 8 liters of water a day. So my partner and my doctor quit bugging me when I started this challenge. The person didn't tell me that he was borderline diabetic or something like that. And when he started drinking his water and figuring out how to carry it around and have it in his car and how to do that, the backache that he'd had for years went away on about the 6th day. And he realized that everybody was right, that he needed to drink more water. Run a 5K in a time that produces shock and awe in my family. That was a formerly very athletic person who'd become a bit of a couch potato. And he didn't say, I want to get in shape. Of course, he did have to do that. He didn't say, I want to train or whatever. He said, I want to run a 5K and shock my family. So that was really fun. And he did achieve that in about a month or so, maybe 6 weeks. Whistle with my fingers so my daughter hears me on the soccer pitch. This was a mom whose kids were really embarrassed by the way she cheered for them. And so she decided to learn how to whistle. That was really fun, easy to repeat. And, she learned it in a short time, maybe a month. And this one's one of my favorite ones. Have a place to share my reflections on lean in all aspects of my life. That was somebody who wanted to start a blog, but we talked about her personal challenge and decided that it was a place to share her reflections. We also have somebody in Kata Girl Geeks recently doing make reflecting a habit. And so she did a challenge to have a habit of reflecting within a certain time period. And that was really cool to watch. Those ones, though, what would you see? You would see what she wrote down or when she sat down to do it. It's probably better that you're doing something in the beginning that you can see and like I say, videotape. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Mark?
We had a question in the chat around the relationship between kata and A3. And I responded that A3 is useless without good coaching, and this is how you develop those skills. But if anybody else wants to chime in on that, I think it's a crucial topic because these are not different things.
Yeah, the underlying thinking, absolutely the same. Some of the documentation, very similar. Mike Rother has a talk where he says, you plug your kata into this part of your A3, and the difference is that Kata assumes coaching. I think A3 is often used for reporting, perhaps wrongly used.
Well, A3 is supposed to be used with coaching, and that's
Yes.
where
Yeah.
a lot of companies don't understand.
Right.
And the other thing I think that a lot of companies don't understand about A3 is that very often the form is filled out again and again and again, almost for every coaching conversation. It's updated, it's changed And it's not just one pass through and you're done. And we see the same things on the storyboards. Um,
Mhm.
A3 is an iterative process. And what we often study is the last one, the one that was completed or the one that was simply used to track, execution. But
Yes.
what we don't see are the intermediate forms of that A3 where we even figured out what we needed to do.
Okay. And I think I've heard Jeff Liker talk about that a lot. So I just wanted to go back. Was my plan to talk about what's a challenge, what's the role of the challenge as the direction we're moving and defining that finish line. I talked a little bit about wording and what do we mean by understanding some good challenges for beginners. And that leaves me to connecting with the Kata community. So here's a few. Every Friday, Kata School Cascadia gets together and we hold our free Friday Zooms. This is from one of our first years. And if you are interested in joining our Zooms, you can email me at info@cataschoolcascadia.org, or you can see that tiny URL there, KSC Friday Zooms. Or you can pick out your phone right now and take a picture with that QR code, and that should take you right to register for our Zooms. When you register for the Zooms, you will get a calendar invitation. I will also put you on our mailing list. So every Friday, you will get news from Pedestal Cascadia, as well as the links to the Zoom recordings of our calls. And you can download those if you want. And then also, I put a little summary every time. So there's join us on Fridays. We'd love to see you anytime on a Friday.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. You had the graphic of the steps up in front, and
Hmm.
that graphic always seems to me like you do the challenge, and then you do the current condition, and then you do the target condition, which is true.
Yeah.
But often you kind of go have to like wiggle your way there with like the challenge and a little bit of current condition, and that's massage the
Yes.
challenge a little bit more and back and forth. So I just want to say that out loud so that it's clear that this webinar talks about the challenge, but we might learn more about the challenge when we get to the current condition piece. And so we have to go back and
Yes.
forth between steps sometimes.
Yeah, in fact, if somebody is really doesn't have good current condition or an idea of how things work now, we study the current condition before we set the challenge.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So Mark and I thought it would be fun that if you have a KPI or a corporate direction that you need to make into a challenge, you could ask us to help and we would enjoy doing that for free so that we could have a wider sample of how these things work and what people struggle with. There is the email for Kata School Cascadia. That's the one that I answer, info@kata-school-cascadia.org. And I'm just going to stop sharing now. So if you have questions about challenges or you have a challenge that was given to you around the save $250,000 this quarter, we'd be really happy to talk about that and ask some coaching questions that we might ask in order to get some clarity for you on the challenge. Okay, so who has a comment? Or a question or a challenge that you would like to talk about? Um,
Oh, the tracking of progress is made and how often. And that's a good one. And we'll
okay.
get into that in current condition. But what emerges from the challenge is the outcome metric, which could be a KPI or it could be a piece of one. And in current condition, we want to can maintain a run chart of that high level metric that we're driving toward. For example, in Tracy's example, how many faucets are we making every day? How often as possible, as often as makes sense, whenever it changes. So if it's faucets per day, I want to put that number up there every day. And if it's something per quarter, well, let's think about it. If we're going to make the numbers for the quarter, how many do we need to get a month? How many do we need to get a week? How many do we need to get a day? We can still back into understanding what good looks like as frequently as possible.
I would say though, daily in the Kata daily is probably minimal, right? That's probably the
Yeah.
minimum every single day. Go ahead, Maria.
So Mark, you were saying a lot of that is done in the charts that are generated as part of the current condition. And then Tracy, to your point, the storyboard really ties it all together. And the thinking, the best practices that is done daily, where you going through the coaching cycle like Mark and I did in the first webinar. And then the storyboard is walking you through all the data points, really, the data points of your thinking are all captured on the storyboard, and that should be happening daily.
And coming back around, if it was an A3, it would be the same conversation. I'd still be tracking my status against the problem I'm trying to solve on my A3, and the information will be updated every time we had a conversation.
Sometimes people have really cool challenges, and sometimes they're a bit more personal, and sometimes they're really work related. Anyway, I think it's time to say thank you and goodbye. Thank you for coming and spending what here on the Pacific Coast is lunchtime with us. And we will be back in 1 month on March 18th for Grasping the Current Condition. Thank you, everybody.